calories still count, and I'm not saying that they don't, but there's a lot of other reasons. And on this handout, I list just a few of them, and I think this would be a good time to go over a couple of those at the bottom of the sheet. And that is high insulin. Insulin is a hormone, and it regulates your blood sugars. Now, you can have normal blood sugar, excuse me, but have high insulin. And the reason is because your body's pumping out a lot of insulin in order to keep those normal blood sugars. But the problem is that if you're producing a lot of insulin, the typical side effect is that you gain weight, you feel hungry, and you get tired. Other reasons a person could gain weight or have difficulty losing weight is because of high cortisol. Cortisol is a hormone that's produced by your adrenal glands. It's a stress hormone. And cortisol is a normal hormone to produce when your body is stressed, but if you're constantly producing cortisol, you're going to gain weight, especially around the midsection in both men and women. Sometimes my patients complain that they have difficulty losing weight, and they come to me because their hormones are not balanced, and no one's really taken a close look at that. And same with thyroid. A lot of the times patients get their thyroid checked, and the numbers say that they're normal, but they're not feeling well. And a lot of the times it's because there's other markers of thyroid that haven't been checked and are out of whack, and nobody's really checking. So there's lots of different medical factors that can contribute to the inability to lose weight. And the reason I think that's really important to say is because if you're one of those who've been counting calories and exercising and not losing weight, it's very, very likely that those reasons may be part of what's going on with you. And it's something that I deal with every day in my patients here at my clinic, Palm Harbor Center for Health and Healing. The first place that I think we all need to start, despite any of these possible medical issues, is that we really want to start with a whole foods diet. And here's what I mean by that. Just because something is calorie-free doesn't necessarily mean it's good for you to eat. So, for example, I know a lot of people, a lot of women, a lot of men would drink something like a Diet Coke because it's got 0 calories. But the problem with that is that there's not only no nutritional value to a Diet Coke, but all the colors and the artificial chemicals and the preservatives and all of the things that are in that, I wouldn't even really call it a food, in that product, are so bad for you that it can cause other health problems. So the ideal diet is truly a whole foods-based diet and is minimally processed. And I understand that that's not something that we can do overnight, but it's a step-by-step process for some people, and I work with them very closely to be able to get there. Another thing that I think is really important is that when you're shopping, and if you've got kids, you can bring them with you, but if it's just you, you know what you really want to shoot for is color. Because there's a long list of vitamins and minerals, and there's a whole other category of nutrients that are called phytonutrients. And these nutrients all have thousands and thousands of different functions and different health benefits. You know, it's not like folic acid only has one health benefit. It's responsible for thousands of different reactions in your body. But because we can't all be nutritionists and biochemists, as long as you look for food with real color, you'll probably get all the different nutrients that you need. So looking for your dark purples and your red and your orange, and especially the dark green like kale and spinach. Now, to carve or not to carve is a very, very big question. I think that carbs can be a very healthy part of your diet, but you know, the thing is, folks, those carbs really have to be clean. And here's what I mean by clean carbs. The less processed, the better. So I'm talking about eating your brown rice over your white rice, and instead of the instant mashed potatoes out of a box, which hopefully nobody really does anymore, but you'd be surprised, we would shoot for the sweet potato. And we should also try to get some of our carbs from our starchy vegetables, like the squash, and even, I don't know if carrots aren't really a starchy vegetable, but you know, your mixed vegetables are going to be excellent sources, and you really don't have to even eat a lot of carbs. A lot of times people go on these, or what they call a low-carb diet, but actually they're just eating normal portions. But we're just so used to supersizing everything that we think we're on a low-carb diet. So we really want to keep our carbs clean. We want them to be high fiber. You know, wheat's been a very controversial subject for a while now. And the reason is because wheat is a source of gluten, and you may or may not be familiar with gluten, which is a protein. Gluten is a protein that's found in all wheat food, whether you home make your whole wheat bread or you buy your Wonder white bread. And there's definitely a certain percentage of people that don't do well eating all of that wheat. And the problem is that we think we're getting a variety of foods when actually we're having a slice of toast for breakfast, a sandwich at lunch, and a bowl of pasta at dinner, and we think that we've had a variety of food, but actually you've eaten your wheat with your wheat and your wheat. So it's really important to make sure you get a variety of grains and you try some different things like quinoa, and you can have some brown rice or wild rice and amaranth, millet, flax, and all these other really fantastic grains that are now available everywhere pretty much. And if you're not sure about that, you can always feel free to contact me and I can help you work through some of that. But it's really important, especially at breakfast, and I would really say at every main meal, that you try to add some lean protein to your diet. And this protein does not have to always be animal-based. I think a lot of people think that if they're not getting animal protein in their diet, that they're not getting enough protein. And that's actually not the case. It's just that if you're not going to get animal protein, and certainly there's nothing wrong with that, in fact, in a lot of cases, it's almost better, you have to just make sure you're eating, high quality protein. So legumes and lentils are a great source of protein. And actually, hemp and quinoa are wonderful sources of protein. Nuts can be a pretty good source of protein, depending on what kind of meat you eat. Eggs, whether you're a strict vegetarian or not, eggs are an excellent source of protein. A lot of my patients tell me things like, but I thought eggs were bad for you, and eggs have cholesterol, and I have high blood cholesterol. But the good news is that this idea that cholesterol in food pushing up blood cholesterol is really something of the 80s. It's not true. Dietary cholesterol does not push up blood cholesterol. So let me say that again. Cholesterol in food will not push up your blood cholesterol unless you're eating gobs and gobs and gobs and gobs of it. That's right. You really have elevated cholesterol because of eating too many carbs and also being overweight, and also because of your liver's inability to clear that cholesterol. So I'm not saying you should go and eat all the cholesterol that you want, but the idea that you should not eat an egg because of cholesterol is really actually, frankly, quite absurd. That's not the case. And the thing is, I know in working with patients with diabetes and blood sugar issues that patients who eat a slice of or some type of grain, and when they combine it with their lean protein, actually have better blood sugar control, because the protein helps to kind of keep everything nice and even. And you don't have to have diabetes or even borderline diabetes for that to be true for you too. So it's important that, especially at breakfast time, that you're getting plenty of lean protein. So eggs could be a part of that. I know that a lot of my athletes like to take a little bit of protein powder and mix it in their steel-cut oats as a source of protein. Veggie omelets are another fun way to get some protein. And you can do some organic. I love to buy organic extra firm tofu, and sometimes I'll have that as a source of protein, especially the organic kind, so that the soy is not genetically altered and genetically modified. Moving on, a lot of people ask me about supplements. Do I really need a supplement? And the answer is nope, you don't need a supplement as long as you're eating 10 servings of hopefully organic vegetables and some fruit every single day. So let me say that again. If you're not eating, not 5, but 10 servings of fresh vegetables and fruit every single day, then no, you don't need a supplement. However, if you're not getting all of those fresh vegetables and fruits in your diet, and notice I say the word vegetables first because we really want most of those 10 servings to come from our vegetables, you are going to need a supplement. And the proof is in the labs, because I run them all the time. And you'll rarely, in fact, I feel pretty confident I can say that you'll never see a person have optimal levels of vitamins in their tissue, or I should say optimal tissue levels of vitamins and minerals, if they're not eating a lot of vegetables a day. And that's because you just can't get them from your processed mac and cheese. You just can't get it from all the carbs or even the meat that you're getting. if you're having romaine lettuce as a form of your salad, you're not going to get all of those nutrients, because romaine lettuce is not bad, but you really have to get all the colors that we talked about earlier. The purples, the reds, the orange, the yellow, and the green, even white, like in cauliflower. And so if you're not getting these from your diet every single day, and truly I mean every single day, there will be nutritional deficiencies, even if you're overweight, believe it or not. And again, the way I know this is because I run the labs, and over and over and over again, I see that ironically in our overnourished patients, meaning overweight, we see that they're getting too much of too little, meaning they're getting way too many calories for way too little nutrition. So, I think another really, really important aspect to losing weight and feeling great is you could do all the cardio that you want, and I think that's fantastic, and I have nothing against cardio. And when my patients tell me they're doing their cardio every day or 4 times a week, I give them a thumbs up. But if you really want to try to even start to change your body shape, you really have to incorporate at some level some type of strength training. Whether you do it on your own or with some type of coach or personal trainer, you're going to have to do something at least twice a week, because the goal is to increase lean muscle mass. And you can't increase lean muscle mass by going on a diet, but you can increase lean muscle mass by adding strength training to your program, which will slowly put some muscle on you. And I got to tell you, it's very hard for women to lay down a lot of muscle because we don't have all that testosterone. So even just to put a pound or two of lean muscle mass on requires quite a bit of strength training, but it's worth it, because not only will you ramp up and rev up your basal or your baseline metabolic rate, you're also going to change your shape and you're going to see a lot more tone. So that means that you can eat more calories and still not gain weight, which is a major thumbs up. So strength training is really key. So if right now all you're doing is your walking program, that's fantastic, and you ought to be very happy about that. But if you can fit any kind of strength training in that, I would go for it. You know, you don't have to lift weights, by the way, to get some strength training in. There's a lot of exercises, like in yoga, that you can do which uses your own body weight. And that's pretty tough. I know that in some cases, there are some exercises in yoga that are really difficult just because you're working with your own body weight, and that can be kind of difficult. So whether you're using your own body weight as strength training, or light weights or heavy weights, or whatever it is you're doing, try to get something in, and be sure to consult somebody if you're not really sure about what you're doing, because the last thing you want to do is get injured. Because once you get injured, then you got to pay to get rehabbed, and then it takes a long time to get back on track. Now, one thing I want to say about food records and food diaries and things like that, they're not for everybody, and in some cases they can make a huge difference. Everybody is different and needs something kind of different to help them keep accountable. In my practice, I don't just use food records. I actually use something called food planners, because if you don't plan, you really do plan to fail. And here's what I mean by that. I don't just ask my patients to go online and fill out what they're eating on some type of app or even manually. What I ask them to do is the night before, I ask them to think through about what their schedule looks like the very next day, and only one day at a time. And then I want them to start planning what they're going to eat. Now, naturally, I sit with them and I create these meal plans and I explain it to them, but then when it comes time to it, they need to sit down and plan out their next day's meal. And you'll find that that helps tremendously with getting organized and staying accountable. So for example, tonight is Tuesday night. Before you go to bed, try to take about 15 or 20 minutes tonight. It's a good action step for you. And think about what your plans are for tomorrow. Are you working? Is it a day off? Are you going to be traveling? Do you have visitors coming in town? What are you going to eat for your breakfast, lunch, dinner, and your snacks? Do you have all the ingredients you need in your refrigerator? Do you need to take a quick run to your local grocery store to pick a few things up? You definitely want to plan these things, because a very common scenario that gets a lot of people into trouble is when it's the end of the day and they haven't planned a thing and they're really hungry and they pretty much end up at the drive-through or making unhealthy choices in their pantry or whatever the case is. So it's really, really important that you plan ahead. Another important point that I want to talk about is how important it is to eliminate every single day. You need to use the bathroom, and it's really a lot of women have a tough time with this one. The first, probably simplest thing that I can remind all of you to do to help with this process is to drink a ton of water. I would say minimally 2 liters a day. So if you're not sure what 2 liters looks like, you can, a typical water bottle is about half of a liter. So 4 of those a day. They also have water bottles that are 1 liter, so 2 of those a day. And I would have them in front of you so you can see them, and make sure that you drink a minimum of 2 liters a day, because the water helps your body to eliminate, especially in the large intestines. And if any of you ladies or anyone out there is on any type of medication, you really need water to help your liver detoxify those meds out of your system. And finally, your cells all need water to be able to rev up your metabolism. So in other words, when you are dehydrated, your metabolic rate drops. And so that's not what we want. So water is really important, but especially for elimination. The other thing is that fiber is really important. Now, we would preferably get our fiber from our fruits and our vegetables, legumes and seeds and nuts in our diet. And the thing is, there's a lot of people who have difficulty digesting these foods. And so naturally, as a medical nutritionist, I'm helping them with that process, because we're not just forcing people to eat a lot of vegetables and fruits that they can't digest. In fact, one of the areas that I specialize in is in gut nutrition and bowel disease. And we help get our bowel disease patients normalized again so they can go back to eating these foods in a way that won't give them problems. And so if you're in that situation, you definitely need to talk to someone about helping you get your gut back in shape. But if you're already there, then it's really important that you make sure you get your fiber. And the way to do that, it comes back to my earlier point, which is to get your 10 servings of vegetables and fruit every single day, and make sure that they're colorful. A lot of you have heard of probiotics. Probiotics are live bacteria. We actually all have, and get this, 100 trillion live bacteria that live in our intestines. And when that neighborhood of bacteria, or you can call it the ecology or the balance of those bacteria, become disrupted, either because of the overuse or the misuse of antibiotics, because of stress, because of medications, because of poor diet, because of genetic defects that alter our gut health, whatever the case is, when that happens, it can cause a lot of problems. So being on a probiotic is a really good idea. And some of the over-the-counter probiotics are pretty good. I use prescription grade, and they're very high dose, and they help tremendously. But probiotics can really help a lot with getting your body to move your bowels and eliminate properly. So that's something that you definitely want to consider. The problem is that if you're not moving your bowels and if you're not doing this, and the reason I'm including this information as part of this talk is because then you start reabsorbing toxins and even hormones like estrogens. A lot of people don't realize that we make them, but we have to detoxify them and we have to eliminate them. If you don't eliminate them, you're going to reabsorb them and you're going to be filled with estrogen, and that's called being estrogen dominant. And if you want to get fat quickly, be estrogen dominant. Think about what they do to fatten up chickens. They fill them up with hormones. So it's really, really important that you get your hormones balanced, which I do in the office here with my patients, or you can do with your physician as well. There are other ways when the situation becomes kind of difficult, such as magnesium citrate. Now, there are many different forms of magnesium. There's magnesium glycinate, magnesium citrate, magnesium gluconate, and the kind of magnesium that will help you move your bowels is magnesium citrate. And the last thing I wanted to mention is that there are a lot of people who have what's called drug-induced constipation, especially people who take mood-altering medications, whether they're anti-anxiety or antidepressants. So it's very difficult. Sometimes you have that constipation, and it's not because of the lack of a poor diet, but it's really more because the medications that people are on cause the constipation. And in those special cases, you really need to work with somebody trained to be able to deal with that safely. So we talked about we kind of went through our 10 points. We talked about other medical factors that can contribute to the inability to lose weight. I just want to remind you all that even though I said earlier that it's not just about calories, I should say that calories do count, and I think I mentioned that calories do count. But the message that I'm trying to put out there is that it's not just about calories. So I try to help people understand that it's really can be a relatively complicated situation that requires some professional help. I hope I've been able to answer some of your questions, and I'd love to open it up for some Q&A if that's okay with Pamela. Pamela, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, and absolutely, we're going to open up the chat box and allow some of our listeners to ask some questions.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Sheila, can you respond to some of the questions? You're frozen on my machine.
Uh-oh, I didn't hear any questions yet. No, I can't
Sheila,
see the questions.
Is Sheila frozen on you guys' machine?
Okay, let me look. Chat box. Okay, hold on. Pamela, where's the chat box? Okay. All right, well, wow. I see a lot of things here. Okay, can you hear me, Pamela? Okay. Do you want me? Oh, you can hear me. Okay. Okay, thank you. So let me start answering these questions. Just keep confirming that you can hear me because I'm nervous that you can't hear me, but okay, so some people are asking about supplements and some people are asking about probiotics. Okay, thank you. Probiotics. Somebody asked about yogurt as a probiotic. Yes, yogurt definitely is an excellent source of probiotics. The only problem is that yogurt is a dairy food with a lot of sugar. And if you have problems or sensitivity to dairy, it's not going to cut it. That doesn't mean that everybody can't eat dairy, but there's definitely a certain percentage of my bowel patients that can't tolerate dairy, so they're not going to be able to get it from that. If you can tolerate dairy, and you're certain you can tolerate dairy, and you know it's not causing problems with your health, then the sugar content really can't be too high because that actually makes things worse. So you really need to find a low sugar. Here's a good brand. Stonyfield, the Greek yogurt, the plain, or even the vanilla flavored is relatively low in sugar. As far as most people, I really try not to make that imposition on everybody until I have some data or some labs that show that there is a sensitivity. But I will tell you that in all my ADHD kids, they are off dairy like yesterday. And a lot of my bowel disease patients, my Crohn's, my colitis patients, they're absolutely off dairy. If you've got any kind of skin issues, eczema, you better believe your dairy is out. So it depends on who's asking the question. I have nothing against cow milk as long as that you don't have a problem with dairy. But all of those types of patients that I just mentioned are simply not going to be able to tolerate it. And the good news is that when they take it out, the skin clears up and they usually feel great. I absolutely do lots of gluten testing. There are many labs that do high quality testing. Just depends on what lab, insurance, and all of these situations in these matters. And I absolutely check hormones. But if you want to go back to your own physician, you're just going to have to bug them a little bit and ask them to check both what's called your estradiol, that's E2, and your progesterone levels. If your progesterone levels are basically tanked, meaning they're practically not there, then you're going to have to talk to someone about helping you out with that. And there's different ways of going about it. You don't always have to do hormone therapy, and it's tricky. Every situation is unique, and my practice, it's not cookie cutter. It's very unique to the patient. All right, let's see. Let me look at some of these other questions. Supplements. Okay, so folks, supplements are really loosely regulated. And because of that, I generally, as a professional, don't recommend over-the-counter, so I'm using only professional products because I don't want to be liable for any of my patients getting sick. So I can comment on over-the-counters to a certain extent, but I am a little leery because of the contamination issues. Some of these products are contaminated with lead and mold and yeast and bugs and mercury and glass and soil. So I try to avoid those problems and make sure that I have them on professional stuff where I know the quality and the contamination issues are not an issue. I'm located in Palm Harbor, very close to the intersection of Tampa Road and East Lake Business Road. And let's see, I want to see if I can ask you or see a few more of your questions. That's right, supplements in the health food store are regulated, but it's all very loosey-goosey. And if you know anything about supplements, you know that, it's all very, like I said, it's all very just kind of it's not a tightly regulated industry. However, professional products are very tightly regulated, and they are very much high quality. Sometimes they're about the same price, sometimes they're a little bit higher. It's important that you consult with someone who is familiar with them, because you don't want to just go on anything. It's important that whoever you're working with is familiar with the names of all the medications you're on, so that they're familiar with interactions, and that you're only taking what you need. You don't want to be just taking any old supplement. It's not a good idea. Let's see some of your other questions. I'm looking here. Vegetarian diets. Hold on, I'm just going to take a quick drink of water. Vegetarian diets, I think, are wonderful for some individuals. Some people ask me about vegetarian diets, paleo diets, vegan diets, and it just depends on who's asking the question. When people call my office and they ask, hey, can you please tell me about Dr. Dean's program? There's no one program. It depends on what your issue is. If you're coming into my office with fibromyalgia and rheumatoid arthritis, your scenario is really quite different than my patient that's got cardiovascular disease. And that's different from my patient who has autoimmune thyroiditis and Hashimoto's. Everyone's a little bit different. So my job is to really get to the root cause and not just, try to cover it up with symptoms. There's really no such thing as lactose-free yogurt that I'm aware of. There might be, but I haven't really seen it. And the reason is because the bacteria in yogurt tends to digest ferment the lactose. So that's why a lot of people who can't tolerate milk can tolerate yogurt, because of the bacteria in there. But again, my concern with yogurt is that if you're sensitive to it, yogurt's not going to be good for you. And it's certainly all the sugar. We have to be careful with all the sugar. Yes. It really just have to turn that label around. The other thing is, I am definitely not interested in non-organic dairy because I feel that you know, it's important that if we do eat dairy, that it be organic. That would be organic. The protocol for someone with extremely high triglycerides and cholesterol is absolutely going to have to be to cut the carbs, because we know carbohydrate intake ramps up triglycerides, not fat intake. Cholesterol is something that will come down with fiber and weight loss. I do some very advanced cardiovascular panels. A lot of the insurance companies cover it. And, you know, it gives me a lot more information than just your basic lipid panel. I can do a lot of genetic testing as well to tell me if genetically you're at risk. I think coconut milk is a thumbs up. And I'll tell you what else I love is that almond milk, the unsweetened almond milk. I like whey protein. I like soy protein. But again, it all depends. Your soy protein absolutely has to be organic, because if you're eating soy protein that's not organic, you're eating genetically altered God knows what. So I would be very careful with soy protein that's not 100% USDA organic. The reason is because in the United States, if a product is organic, it is forbidden for it to be genetically altered. So that's the only guarantee that you have as of today, June 11th, 2013, that your product is not genetically altered, and that is if it is USDA organic. Yes, I love almond milk. You know, rice milk is nice, but it's really high sugar. The almond milk seems to be the new great thing, and indeed it really is. Rice protein is wonderful. I use it in a lot of my medical foods, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend rice milk because it's really high sugar. But a lot of the medical foods are basically for medical conditions. They're powders that are for medical conditions, and they're different ones depending on the disease. And rice protein is usually the base for these products because it's so hypoallergenic. A lot of your fermented foods are wonderful. Sea vegetables are wonderful. And I think I mentioned the coconut milk. I'm a big fan of coconut milk. A lot of people ask me why I like coconut milk, because after all, it is saturated. However, coconut milk is high in stearic acid. That's spelled S-T-E-A-R-I-C. And stearic acid has been shown to be one of the only saturated fatty acids that's non-atherogenic, meaning it doesn't cause heart disease. So coconut milk is good. Coconut oil is wonderful because it has a high smoke point. It does not go rancid, along with avocado oil and grapeseed oil with a G. So one of the problems with cooking with canola, actually there's two major problems with cooking with canola. Canola, well, frankly, there's no such thing as the canola plant. Canola is a genetically modified oil that the Canadians came up with, and they called it canola oil. The problem is that canola has a very low smoke point. So the moment you start frying with it, it goes bad, and you're actually consuming something that's not good for you. If you're using it cold, it might be okay because it's so not saturated, but the whole thing is one big genetically altered oil. It's not even a real food. It's a made up food that the Canadians created. I think that yam-based progesterones can be okay. I have different types of progesterone creams that I use for my patients that need a little bit of bioidentical progesterone. I really don't need to use oral. The creams work beautifully, but you can't really use creams alone. You have to do adrenal support, and I know that's a little technical, but there's a couple of things that you have to do. You can't just try to support one hormone system because there's a domino effect. It's really important that you look at everything. Everything has to be balanced, and this requires some proficiency. You have to know what you're doing because you don't want to make things worse. You certainly can make appointments for hormone testing. We can do whatever we need to. Generally speaking, though, I want to tell you that I honestly, if anybody comes to me, I really need them to fill out forms ahead of time, because I study your case on my own time ahead of time, so that when you walk in, I'm not asking you 1,000 redundant questions, and we're going to cut right to the chase, because I'd like to know all the details before you walk in, and certainly my patients fill me in on other details when they come in. But I generally have a whole game plan prepared for my patients when they walk in, so that we can use the time not just answering questions, but really getting a game plan together. I love coconut water, and they sell them in the paper packages. And I like coconut oil. That's fantastic. And yes, I agree. You don't need to use a lot. And yes, it is yummy. You guys have awesome questions. Yeah, coconut milk and smoothies are wonderful. I used a little coconut milk the other day with my raw protein, chocolate flavored protein powder and some chia seeds, and it was fantastic. I sweetened it up with a little bit of stevia, and I loved it. It was really great. It was kind of like a little dessert pudding. It was really delicious. Vitamin D deficiency is definitely a big deal. Now, in obese individuals, they generally tend to be a little lower in vitamin D anyway, because vitamin D does tend to store in fat tissue. So I'm not shocked when I see low vitamin D in my patients who have obesity. But it's still important that their vitamin D levels be not just normalized, but optimized. You know, labs like LabCorp and Quest will give you reference ranges that are very broad. We like to keep them really tight and within a certain range. There's lots of studies that show that you can significantly increase your risk for breast cancers and certain other cancers if vitamin D levels are low. Yes, Splenda is not, as much as they would love to convince you that Splenda is natural, it is not natural. Splenda is a chlorinated sugar molecule that interferes with thyroid production because chlorine and iodine compete. They're all halogens, and they so all that extra Splenda, I'm not recommending Splenda. I'm certainly not recommending NutraSweet, which is essentially a neurotoxin and will probably be off the market in another 10 years. That's why everything's moving over to Splenda. But one of the things that I do like is stevia because it's natural, it's a real herb, and you can grow it if you really wanted to. Corn on the cob, you know, I mean, it's not, it's going to be genetically altered, but, you know, a little corn on the cob, I enjoy very much, especially during fun special occasions. Foods to reduce inflammation, I think that cruciferous vegetables are at the very top of that list. Cruciferous vegetables are a family of vegetables that include your broccoli, Brussels sprouts, your cauliflower, your kale, bok choy. They are very anti-inflammatory. They're excellent for hormones. They're very anti-cancer. Certain types of berries have been shown to reduce inflammation, like blueberries. And there's a spice, an ancient spice called turmeric. And there are hundreds of evidence-based studies that show that turmeric lowers inflammation, and I use a lot of turmeric in my medical foods. Love stevia, definitely stevia over Splenda, and asparagus is wonderful. Cinnamon is a fantastic sweetener if you don't like the taste of stevia. Agave nectar, you know, a little bit here and there is fine, but, you know, agave nectar is controversial. I'm not really a huge fan of it. I might use a little bit here and there, but I generally tend to lean towards stevia. And if you don't like seafood, that's perfectly fine. In fact, these days, with all the seafood being farm raised, you probably don't want to be eating that because as much as the omega-3s you get in your seafood, you get a load of mercury unless your fish is wild. So the American Heart Association has told us over and over and over again that you need about 2,000 to 3,000 milligrams of omega-3s daily, which is the same thing as saying 2 to 3 grams. So if you have fish oils, turn your bottle around, and if it says that you have to look at the EPA and the DHA combined, and that needs to add up to about 2,000 calories. I know we're starting to run out of time here. You guys are fantastic. I'm sorry that I was unable to answer every single question, but I hope that I was able to get most of them.
Okay, ladies. Okay, ladies, so we're going to call it a night, and I want to point out to you this right here. You have all been given this handout from Dr. Dean, and that has been downloaded on our Facebook group, this handout, for some of the tips that she covered tonight. So be sure to download that. And, of course, all of her information is on the handout for visiting her on her website or calling her. And be sure, guys, to post your action steps this week. And remember, at Tailgate on June 29th, we're going to be doing a midpoint check-in for our clinical study to just kind of see how all this healthy eating is going for you guys. So have a great week, and we will have another webinar next Tuesday night, and so look for the information about that. Dr. Dean, you are awesome. Fab 50 delivers with the absolute cream of the crop. Thank you so much, and good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you. Oh, you guys are amazing.